Good afternoon. Welcome to this Learning Connects live interview of the European Training Foundation. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. We all have a personal story to share about how the global pandemic has changed our lives and the lives of our families. Today, we're going to try to see the impact of this crisis, and it would be great if you could share your personal stories of how this global pandemic changed your life, especially when it comes to education and training and labor market situation. But first of all, let me introduce our guest for this conversation today, Cristina Mereuta from the European Training Foundation. Hi, Cristina, and welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us today. Iwona Ganko from the European Training Foundation. Hi, Iwona.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us today. And Doriana Monteleone from the European Training Foundation. Hi, Doriana.
Hi, hello.
Welcome, colleagues. Before we get started, to all our followers watching us live, please let us know where you're watching us from. We really would like to know the geography of this live session. And I'm already actually seeing some of your comments coming, and I absolutely will come back to them later on. So, there is a wide range of research that periodically investigates the impact of this global health crisis that we're still living in. And recently, European Training Foundation, together with Eurofund, which is another EU agency, carried out a study trying to understand the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic on our society. This is the study, and I will ask our technical producers actually to post a link to it in the chat. So this research provides an overview on how our life has changed due to the COVID-19. The topics include a range from quality of life to housing and financial situation to working conditions and work-life balance. But today specifically, we will look at how the pandemic actually has contributed or not to building a more inclusive education and labor market. And my first question will go to Cristina. Cristina, so what is the latest data available about the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic on our lives and the lives of the EU neighboring countries? Cristina, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, pandemic was really one of the a special event in the history, I think, and the fact that even after 3 years, various organizations, including us, we are looking at the effects of the COVID, it actually proves the long-term impact of such a crisis. In terms of data sets, I think if I remember the first weeks and the first months of the crisis, I also remember that we had to rechange and refocus our work program, for example, and not only us. So practically most countries, most international and European organizations have changed their practices, their research focus to look at the immediate and medium-term effects of the COVID. Why? Because we know, all of us, we know very well that it affected practically the whole entire nations, population, groups of companies, societies overall, and that after 3 years, we can already see very clearly that it worsened the inequalities, fracture lines across and within societies. It also practically tested, the societies, but also the individual's capacity when it comes to simply, resilience. Yeah, it's an important word that, it has been used a lot over the last 3 years. It was really difficult to predict, to identify even the consequences, to look at the trends during the first year, let's say. It was really difficult to even run, normal statistical research. So I remember that, for example, the statistical offices were very, it was very, very difficult for them to run the normal surveys, due to this, the constraints we faced. But all in all, I think we managed to look at the multiple, let's say, dimension of the COVID impact. But what we think as ETF is that this is a long-term impact, and certain elements are not yet well studied or sufficiently studied. And actually this research that we are going to present now, it looks into elements that are less studied or less captured, in particularly in the EU neighborhood. Elements of well-being, elements of the impact of working and learning remotely, also the risk of depression or isolation, of fear. As your colleagues will post immediately, there are issues with the an extreme or high risk of depression, which was it's really striking in the EU neighboring countries.
Cristina, sorry to interrupt you. So 75% of people aged 18-44 are at risk of depression. We can speak about another pandemic here, right?
It's another pandemic, and please note also the age bracket. Yeah, so we often talked about young people, and indeed the young people were very much exposed. And later on, we will also talk about the woman, the impact on women. But here we have also the middle-aged, let's say, yeah. So the active workforce. So really the backbone of our economies, yeah, that are exposed to depression. Another important finding, and what we managed through this research, is also to connect education, labor market status, the usual risks, with housing, with mental health, with other elements. So here I would also underline maybe that, for example, in the EU neighboring countries, 3 out of 10 respondents from households with children, they reported housing insecurity. That really, it's really scary, if I could say like that, because this is the future of the society. If the families with children face such wide difficulty, is really something that it has to be taken into account. So all in all, with Eurofound, together we wanted to shed light on certain elements and aspects of this crisis and the following crisis as well, yeah, and to signal that for certain groups and categories of households, for example, and families, the impact is higher, of course.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot, Cristina. We will come back, I think, to all the issues that you spotted, and also to how actually this data can support us and how it can help to the policymakers to take the right decision and to tackle these challenges. But before we go to my next question, I just would like to show you the wide range of geography that we have today present at this live. We have Silvia from Pamplona, Spain, Daria from Torino, Italy. We have Inga from Georgia. Hi, Inga, and welcome on board. We have Alma from Albania, Sokak from Armenia, Heidia from Tunisia, Lumnia from Kosovo, Rupa from Detroit, Michigan, Mars from Tirana, Nebosha from Serbia. Thanks for joining, and please share your stories. How did you take these challenges related to the global pandemic, and what happened with your education and training? What happened with your job? We also have Dr. Hassan from Yemen, Anna Zakarian from Albania. Hi, Anna. It's great to have you on board again with us. We have Ibrahim from Egypt, Alawa from France, Daniela from Serbia, and Habib, I think he's also coming from France, I guess. So my second question, we need to understand the consequences of this pandemic. But what is the unique in this research that we're speaking about today, and that you will be able to find actually the link on in the chat? What is unique aspect of this research, and what did we learn about EU neighboring countries? Doriana.
Yes, thank you, Maria. I mean, I want to follow what Cristina was saying. No, I mean, we understand that it is important to have information to investigate the challenges and opportunities of our society. And we know also that there are different ways to collect information. In these days, we have the help of modern technologies, no, that can help us to reach out a wider public, and, which is most important, to generate timely information. And this is why in 2022 we collaborated with the Eurofound to launch this EU survey implemented through a social media campaign. It was the first time for ETF to implement this kind of methodology. And if I have to summarize, one of the bigger outcome from a methodological point of view is referred to the results. I mean, our objective, we involved in this first round in 22, 10 EU neighboring countries. And our objective is to obtain around 5,000 responses. And we ended up, after 3 weeks of implementation, with more than 18,000 of filled questionnaires. I mean, for us, it was really, something surprising. And this is exactly the power of this new methodology, of something that put a break with what we were used to do before. As I said, we involved these 10 EU neighboring countries, and they had the possibility to share with us information about different aspects, ranging from the life satisfaction, working condition, access to education, and also their perception of their health conditions. Of course, I mean, we cannot go into details now during this live, but for example, I can say that we discovered some peculiarities of the populations participating in the survey linked to the new digital era. For example, we know that in some countries, more women than men work from home. And we know why, that probably this is due to the presence of children, or that teleworking or hybrid working is the new modality of work. It was perceived as the most favorite one, even if in some cases we have to say the implementation of these new modalities of work have a limit due to the lack of a proper digital infrastructure. The last thing I would like to say as a result, coming from the results of the survey, is that we understood how digitalization is impacting our life today. Is everywhere, is in all the aspects of our life. And also when we come to education, for example, what we saw from the results of the survey is that in some cases, online learning is becoming the new way of acquiring new skills, but also to support career development.
Thanks a lot, Doriana. So we can say that, we covered a lot of different aspects, and also the aspect of inclusion. We became more digital, but the question that I would like to answer today is, did we become more inclusive by becoming more digital? But we will come back to that at a bit later stage. So my next question will go to Iwona, but I would like again to invite all our followers to send your questions, your comments to our speakers or about the study. We will be gladly taking them on board. But Iwona, so in this study we have 27 European countries, so the European Union, and we have the countries neighboring European Union. What are the main differences between the challenges faced by the EU and by the EU neighborhood? Iwona.
Thank you, Maria. Actually, the unique element and contribution of this round of the survey was to expand and trying to learn what is happening in EU neighboring countries as well. We had already some feelings through 4 rounds of the survey in the EU countries done by our sister agency, Eurofound. But now we wanted really to explore what is happening in the countries that ETF is working with, and to hear voices of people.
Iwona, could you please name the countries, because I don't think we named them yet. Those that were included.
Well, we included 10 countries. Maybe Doriana can help me to name the specific countries.
Albania, Georgia, Jordan, Kosovo, Lebanon, Moldova, Morocco, North Macedonia, Palestine, and Tunisia.
Okay, thanks a lot, and over to you, Iwona. Thank you.
And we are planning to expand the survey because we already know that the impact of the pandemic has been stronger in the EU neighboring countries. So we already know that this perception that you were asking of social exclusion is much stronger in the countries that ETF is working with. Particularly what we learned and we heard voices of young people. And here really, while 28 young people in the EU countries feel socially excluded, 41% in EU neighboring countries have this very, very strong feeling. This is a really very strong data that we gathered. It means that the young people are the ones that were the most affected by the pandemic, with the consequences not only in their learning, but also on their work-life balance and overall life and on their futures. Furthermore, we also learned that many of people in the EU countries, but also in EU neighboring countries, are struggling to make ends meet. Imagine that almost half, 48% of the respondents in the EU countries were saying so, while over 81% were talking about this in the EU neighboring countries. Particularly affected are those that they have families and the children. Imagine that 90% of all the respondents that they have children, they are reporting that they have financial difficulties and they have difficulties to make ends meet. Then it also affects what Cristina was saying on their health. So having those financial difficulties, it gives additional stress on how really to, put forward their life. And then we also learned that people were working quite a lot during the pandemic. So the mode of work, of course, changed. Those that they could access digital means and work from home were more happy than those that they really had to deliver their work in place. And we know that in the EU neighboring countries, people were working more than in the EU countries. So we have the data that 1 in 2 of the respondents in the EU neighboring countries were saying that they worked more. But the pandemic had also impact on other aspects of life of people. It had impact on their work-life balance, and here women were particularly affected, especially those that they have children, because they worked more than men, as they report. But also, pandemic had a strong impact on the education and training. As you remember, from one day to another, young people were put on education through digital means, and we had a big issue with access to not only digital infrastructure, but also to digital devices. So we can already see, hearing real voices of people that the pandemic was impacting them at the moment of this strong health crisis, but also consequences will be very much prolonged.
Thanks a lot, Ivan. In fact, I think these data only discovers or confirms what we all been living through actually during the lockdown, is when we had to combine the working life at home, working digitally. We had to adapt somehow our kids to the online learning online. So, I mean, all of those points really confirm what every one of us has lived through these very difficult 2 years. But Before going to my next point, I wanted to take a question that we received from the audience. I think that one actually would go to Doriana. And the question is about methodology. You mentioned, Doriana, that 18,000 respondents reacted to our survey. What was geographical distribution? Were
Yeah.
some countries more represented than others, meaning they are also more digitally inclusive, of course?
Yeah, yes, thank you. I saw the question, and I would like to to answer to this question after explaining a bit how methodologically we tried to guarantee the coverage of the different groups of the population. We target this survey, and this has been done through digital tools, trying to give the same level of representativeness to groups characterized by age, educational level, and of course sex. What we found at the end of the survey is that the outreach, there was a bias. I mean, the outreach of particular categories of population was not equal as the others. For example, population aged over 65 or population with low or medium educational attainment. But what we did was to weight the results, taking in consideration the structure of the population, so the characteristics by age, gender, educational level, etc. So the 18,000 results are not equal across all the countries, but they are proportional to the population size of the countries we have taken in consideration, because we had to guarantee this kind of representativeness of the results. Also because when we ran the analysis to understand what was happening, we did it jointly with the results of the EU27 countries. So what we did was to guarantee this balance, at least for the population size across the 27 plus 10 countries involved.
So in order just to simplify a little bit, let's say that we are using a magnifying glass to look at the people's problems. So we use the same magnifying glass for the EU neighborhood, and we try to use the same one amongst the countries as well. Right,
Yes,
Doriana?
we try to build up a sort of comparable tool, no, to look at these results.
Okay, thanks a lot. Now, I would like to take one comment from the chat, and then I have actually one of the most important questions I prepared for today. We have with us today Hedia Miri Salami, who is the winner of ETF Innovative Teaching and Learning Prize, actually. And she's saying that, yes, we worked a lot because we have to adopt our courses to the online environment so that students can attend video conferences. So yes, that only confirms, all the difficulties in terms of adapting education from one day to another, literally to online format, and trying to keep giving the knowledge to the students. Now, what we've seen so far is that there is another pandemic ongoing with regard to the mental health issue. There is a lot of insecurity in the housing in EU neighboring country. Younger population is more affected, especially when it comes to mental health. And women are more affected by this crisis. Cristina, can we say that this crisis made our societies more inclusive?
Oh, it's rather difficult given the magnitude. If we look at macro, maybe not, but this is also the magnitude of the crisis, the fact that it affected the whole economy, the whole society, and everything. But if you look at the policy responses, and we make maybe it's a forced comparison, but still I would make a comparison with how the governments reacted to the crisis in 2008, 2010. In my opinion, I think the policy responses, particularly those in 2020, were kind of more inclusive. So there were no, the support given, be it social benefits or support to companies and so on, were in most cases universal. So this really supported societies to overcome a huge challenge. But unfortunately, the impact, if we look at the labor force survey, for example, the results of the statistics 1 year later, we noticed that, for example, the impact on labor market, on the employment, unemployment probability, and so on was really harsh, let's say, particularly again for young people. So all in all, I would say that in terms of policy responses, yes, governments try to be more inclusive if we look at the education or the unemployment benefits and so on. But in concrete terms, and if we look now, 3 years later, I would say that probably, it's still a lot of work to do.
That's interesting because we listed a lot of challenges. We listed another pandemic ongoing, the one that is more invisible, the mental health one, and then you still believe that the answer of politicians in our societies were quicker in a way, and were taking into account more the inclusiveness of the society, which is super interesting, and we will come back to that later.
Maybe if I may,
Sure.
Maria, it's true that we cannot say that this pandemic forced us to become more inclusive. But from another perspective, we can say that at least it put the problem on the table. I mean, which is a big difference from before. Now we know that we need to develop systems, tools that improve this level of inclusiveness, because we had to change. We had to suddenly change our way to connect with people. So even if it's not, a real benefit, at least we can say that we started to do something.
Okay,
If I
interesting.
can,
Sure,
if I
Cristina,
can
go.
add, I think this is the biggest benefit. The fact that all of us, be it governments, be it citizens, normally we realized how important. So it was a moment of reckoning. If we remember how we reacted, each and all of us, how we supported our neighbors, how we tried to, to cope with all the challenges. I think there were, great examples of also solidarity. And just to give an example, in the Western Balkans, for example, the youth organization, non-governmental organizations, they really got engaged and helped their peers. So really, I think, as Doriana mentioned, this kind of, the fact that, all these social exclusion risks were really recognized and partly addressed, I think this is the biggest achievement.
I would agree, because there are so many, nice stories about also youngsters joining the forces and helping senior people that were not able to leave homes until very late in the pandemic, and until the moment they got actually the vaccine. So a lot of nice stories. And in fact, I could say that, maybe the awareness was there from the very beginning about the exclusion pandemic. And I would like to take actually one of the comments we received from Daniela Simonovic. She says the pandemic left consequences, first of all, on adolescents and their development. Socialization, research will still to be done on that, and I fully support that. And now I will give the floor to our experts to also give their opinion on that. Online learning is good for people with established habits, motivation. For young people, especially from marginalized groups, it was also technically unfeasible. The organization of study time during the pandemic, also as a mother of Alex, do you still hear me? Yeah, my apologies. I think we had some technical issues, so I'm retaking the comment that we received. So online learning is good for people with established habits, motivation. For young people, especially from marginalized groups, it was also technically unfeasible. The organization of study time during the pandemic was problematic. Online learning has its advantages and disadvantages. That's why the hybrid model is ideal, as well as on the labor market. The pandemic has normalized working from home for those who are comfortable with it, with savings that have proven beneficial. I'm saying this as a pedagogue, career counselor, and a trainer. So I think that there are a lot of challenges out there, but somehow the messages end up on the positive note that also the pandemic has brought something positive. Would you agree with that, colleagues? Cristina, I think you wanted to take that one first.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it really accelerated a lot of changes, be it in education, on the labor market, with a lot of savings, as Daniela mentioned. Yeah, and efficiency, effectiveness in learning or working habits, let's say, or arrangements as well. The legislation is not yet there, if I refer to the labor market or legislation, but I think on the education side, definitely it brought up a lot of improvements. If we also refer to the continuing training, yeah, access of adults to learning programs and so on, and definitely a hybrid blended model is the one in the future. I would only add to the challenges that Daniela mentioned. Also from the ETF perspective, we noticed great losses in when it comes to work-based learning, when it comes to VET type of education, where of course in presence practical lessons, learning in a company were really a must. And for 1 year or 2 years, practically most of this type of education or work experience were practically impossible to organize properly. Yeah. So definitely, I agree that this is the long-term impact that we really are worried about, and definitely additional studies. And actually, ETF will continue on these studies, particularly on the mental aspect. Maria, you mentioned that a couple of times. So the toll on the mental well-being, particularly of learners, young learners. This year, we are running a study on how career guidance, counseling systems and programs should evolve to engage, to embed these elements also of coaching, of social support, mental support, and so on. So I fully agree.
Thanks a lot, Cristina. Doriana, Iwona, do you want to follow on that point?
If I may add, also, as mentioned, absolutely the access issue is a structural issue that needs to be addressed, particularly for those communities with lower social background, more excluded in general terms. But that also confirms some structural challenges that the countries were facing before, and that the policies are needed in particular to strengthen the access to education. But also there is a positive element that comes out from the survey. What we learned from people that responded to the survey is that they actually would like to somehow continue with using digital means, and that the work-life balance in particular can be improved through teleworking. And people are prone actually to expand the access to teleworking arrangements to improve this work-life balance. And this is not only about women with children, but in general terms, those, like for example, in EU neighboring countries that did not have such opportunities are open to take them on board. On the other hand, there are also some positive elements that are coming out that would contribute to a stronger inclusion is in terms of access to training. We also learned that through digital means and online learning, people can access to broader opportunities. And we already know that people are actually prone to do so. So I think that one of the elements for taking policies on board are the issues of access and of upskilling, also in terms of digital skills.
Yeah, I think it was the biggest upskilling exercise of all times, happening in just one day. Doriana, do you want to add something
Yeah,
about this?
just a few reflections from my side. Well, we have understood that this is an opportunity for us. The online learning, teleworking is an opportunity. And of course, it's not always feasible, no? This is what also we have understood. We are not 100% ready. It's important, again, what Daniela said. Maybe the hybrid model is the ideal one. Well, I think that the challenge now is to find the right balance between online working, online learning, and the face-to-face one. Because please don't remind that after 2 years of pandemics, at least this is my experience, the experience I shared with some of my colleagues, it was so nice, so good to come back to face-to-face meetings, to face-to-face work. So here, the challenge is the balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I also wanted to take another positive comment about what the pandemic brought to all of us from Hedia Miri Salami. One of the benefits is that students, teachers, and deciders at the university accepted the online learning, because I think what this pandemic did to all of us, it showed that it is possible to work from home, it is possible to learn online. And I mean, it just put a more broader range of instruments onto the play, and then people would decide which one to take and in what combination. Yeah, I know that there are a lot of studies saying that hybrid would be ideal, but I think this is also depends on the personal circumstances. There is another comment that I would like to take from our chat and invite all our followers to send your questions and in your stories about how this pandemic affected your life. It comes from Abdi Kurd, and it says Osnabrück Declaration and Commission recommendation on vocational education training and Digital Europe programs training side are really good initiatives to follow up. Based on this, ETF is really doing great works. Thanks a lot, Abdi. Thanks to everyone. Cristina, anything to comment about Osnabrück Declaration and this recommendation of the Commission?
No, definitely. Also, the European Commission and the European Union made a lot of efforts, because we saw in practice how education or working has changed from one day to another or from 1 week to another. But there was a lot of efforts to transpose this in policy messages, in principles that, were supposed to be also transferred into curricula, the way of delivery, be it organization of the working, in hybrid or online format, and there are so many implications. And there was this effort of renewing the recommendation, the principles, making the education and training more flexible, not only digitalized, because digitalization blended online learning requires also changing the quality assurance standards, the way skills are certified, and so on. And as previous contributors mentioned, it required a lot of work, not only to change the format and the content of the courses, but also a lot of work to change the certification, recognition of skills, and so on. So ETF is embarked on all these elements. I mean, definitely Osnabrück showed the way for the new, how the VET system should look like up to 2030, I mean to 2025, 2030, also taking into account the digital transition and green transition, and all this element of inclusiveness, and the ETF is committed to do that. And really it's a hard work also with the partner countries, with our partner countries, because there are elements of individualized programs, learning programs, and all these elements that come together. So thank you once again for your words. Really, we try to do our best.
Thanks a lot, Christine, and thanks to our follower, Abdi Kurd. And in fact, I think European Commission and the European institutions are doing their best to tackle the challenges imposed by this crisis. Now, the next question is, we have a lot of data now. We have a lot of data that speaks about challenges, problems. What are we going to do with this data? Because I guess that the ultimate result is that these data should be used to change the policies and to change people's life. Maybe we can start with Iwona first. Iwona.
Thank you, Maria. It's a very pertinent question, but I wanted to just to remind that we are not starting from the scratch. So policies are ongoing, and countries are very much committed to reform their education and training systems, but also labor market systems. So I think that the pandemic experience was that moment of reflection, but also to push some of the policies forward, policies related to digital transition, but also policies related to green transition, because, well, we need to remember that we are moving in a broader geopolitical context, that it has become very, very difficult also in terms of financial implications also on the countries, on the companies, and well, we are entering in the phase actually of difficult years to come. So I think that the pandemic gave this kind of kick off for certain elements to be stronger and well strengthened, and also to make them more accelerated. So these data that we have are actually a very good also combination of information that comes directly from people. So it's not that well, we are collecting, you know, something that has no backup with people's feeling. But I would like to also stress that this is one piece of information that we have, and we need to remember that we need to use different sources of information. We need to track developments in the countries so to improve the policies, and ETF is very much committed to that. Also, I need to underline that in these times, difficult times, also European policies has been opened to EU neighboring countries. This is also very important, also with really direct financial contributions as well to combat the impact of the pandemic. Many programs were actually reprogrammed, redirected towards combating the impact of the pandemic. So I think that all this data is contributing together with other sources to build better policies for the future. I think also that it's not one moment in time that we are collecting this data, and we are preparing also the next round that will take place this year, and colleagues can explain more on that. But I think that it's also important to remember that it's a continuation. So we are in the evolution also improving the policies and the elements that had been already somehow programmed before and adapted now to well, combat the impact, but also to create new opportunities.
Iwona, do you understand correct that now this data is going to be used by ETF in its policy advice function towards EU neighboring countries to help them actually to shape their reforms?
Absolutely. The policy advice is one of the most important functions, together, of course, with the monitoring of the situation in the countries and the creation of knowledge. We all know that knowledge is power. So with the knowledge that we have, we can really support the countries to adapt their policies. But I really want to stress that policymakers are very open to do so and to take ETF policy advice on board to adapt their education and training system, but also in some reforms related to employment. Because we already learned that the people are fearing about the future. So it's also to give some comfort in these really uncertain times. This is something that comes out from all the information sources that we have, is this fear that, well, we do not know what can happen, and somehow we need to adapt to this uncertainty. And the right policies can really very much help in that.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for clarifying that, Iwona. I actually have another follow-up question for Doriana. Doriana, would it be right to say that this methodology is unique because it allows you to get data very quickly using social media
Yes,
and allows you to take a snapshot of the situation and present it to the policymakers? Doriana.
yes, this is one of the main characteristics of this kind of methodology. I mean, as we have seen, in reality, what does it happen? People receive a link to a questionnaire on social media, maybe on Facebook, and they simply reply. I mean, it's something that cut the timing we were used to have when we run surveys. This is the real added value, because we cannot, for example, analyze the pandemic that is happening now, and hopefully we are trying to manage now in 2 years, for example, which was more or less the timing of the classical
Traditional,
implementation.
yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
implementation. So more than unique, I think is really powerful the way in which you can
Doriana,
reach people. Yeah.
sorry for interrupting, just to give a flavor to our people that watch us live. So the data gathering took place in April last year.
April. Yes, this is, ecco, this is, thank you for reminding me, because this is quite important to say. Why we have chosen April? Because April is usually a holidays period. And of course, our colleague, also with our colleagues from Eurofund, we have understood that there is a positive correlation now between the time in which the survey was implemented and the results, the rate of results. What does it mean? It means that if people are more free to look at Facebook, to look at social media, and take times to answer a survey, we get better results. This is what we, of course, learned as additional feature of this kind of modality.
And in terms of the production of the report, it took you then 8 months, 9 months, and you have already a free of hot of the press document with evidence. So
Yeah.
you said that in traditional reports it would take 2 years. So it really
Yes.
massively cuts the time, and that's the unique thing about this methodology.
We have closed the field work in May. And what I can say is that already in July we had preliminary results to share with our countries, and with the added value of having comparison. I mean, benchmarking or comparison also with EU 27 27 results. I mean, we took this big region, big area, made of 27 EU countries and 10 EU neighboring countries, and we had the possibility to see how things are going on in this big continent, let's say.
And it's not about comparing those countries
No,
because
we
they're
are
so
not
much
comparing.
different,
No.
yes, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
getting data for the whole continent, as you said, Doriana, right?
Yes, exactly.
Doriana, I think someone mentioned, or several of you have mentioned, that this report, this exercise will become regular. So my next question to you, what's next in
Ah.
terms of gathering this type of data, and what are ETF plans in this regard? Doriana.
Yeah, the success of the survey implemented last year brought the decision to implement also this year. So we are going to implement the second round of this survey again in April this year. And first of all, what we will gain? We will gain the possibility to guarantee continuity in data collection for the 10 countries who have participated last year. So we have the possibility to analyze trends. We have the possibility to detect changes, no, in the different aspects we have covered. But this year we will add new countries, new EU neighboring countries, including Ukraine, because we raised interest among our partners, above all for the timing of the results, for the time in which they have available information at country level. And with this, what we want to do is to complete this picture of what we call the continent of information. So having a full picture both for the EU 27 countries, but for our partner countries, covering all the regions, so the Western Balkans, Eastern Partnership, Northern Africa, and Middle East. So this is our objective for this year.
Doriana, and the questions will be different, or you will focus on the same aspects as the previous year's one?
Allora, of course we will guarantee the structure we have used last year with the majority of the question. We will use the majority of the question we have used last year to guarantee comparability, no? Between the
Exactly.
results of this year and the previous year. We are trying to revise and to introduce, for example, an idea is to introduce a module on youth this year. But we are
As the most
really in the
vulnerable.
phase. Yes, we are really in the
Yeah.
phase of revising, trying also to improve what didn't work perfectly last year as questions, and to introduce what, according to priorities which live this year, we can address directly in the survey.
Okay, thanks a lot, Doriana. There is one follow-up question in the chat coming from Rupa, and she asks, do you have a mechanism built into the methodology that verifies people who belong to your sample answer the question? So she's asking because it is easy to impersonate someone else on social media. So is there any way you can remove the bots that responded to the question and software? Was it an issue, Doriana?
I mean, not yet. I mean, we cannot dig into also because, for example, Facebook doesn't ask you to provide the proof of who you are. So,
Yeah,
I mean, it's a second level problem we are receiving from this kind of social media. What we try to do is always to try to check against information available in house about the composition of the population. And sometimes what we see is that we receive some proportion of the respondent which is a bit odd according to what, and then in that situation we try to further check with other sources, etc. But at this macro level we cannot enter into the identity of the respondents.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not about checking every single out one of 18,000, but it's more trying to see where the biases and where they can come from. Thanks a
Indeed,
lot, Doriana.
if I may
Yes,
add, Maria, on
absolutely.
this point, because this is very important also, that we are not, we do not intend to track people. We really want to hear the voices, and it's not about knowing exactly who responds. So it's also to avoid this confusion that then the survey is made for specific tracking of the respondents. Absolutely not. What we want to see, as Doriana explained, is what is happening within the population that is answering to the survey.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for precising that up, Iwona. I think it's time actually to wrap up this session. The crisis continues, and it is important to keep gathering data to start maybe somehow to evaluate the impact of this health crisis on our lives, and to start finding solutions to the challenges imposed by the crisis and to making our societies more inclusive. I would like to thank all of the speakers today. Thanks a lot, Cristina Mereuta. Thank you, Cristina.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot to Iwona Ganko from the European Training Foundation. Thanks a lot, Iwona.
Thank you very much. It has been a real pleasure.
Thanks a lot to Doriana Monteleone from the European Training Foundation. Thanks a lot, Doriana, for being with us today.
Thank
And I
you.
also would
Thank
like
you
to
very
thank
much.
all of our followers that followed us and sent us their questions and the comments and the geography. That was super nice of you. Thanks a lot. And of course, my special thanks to Susan and Dominique, who are the technical producers of this live. And thanks to all of you for being with us today. And stay tuned because there is much more to come. Goodbye.